The wind howled across the vast expanse of the Arizona plains, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and dust. In the distance, the silhouette of a lone cabin stood like a sentinel against the endless horizon. Inside, the crackle of a fire filled the modest space with warmth, but the atmosphere carried the weight of loneliness. Jake Tanner, a rugged cowboy with hands weathered by years of hard labor and eyes shadowed by loss, sat by the hearth, polishing a revolver he barely needed. The prairie had a way of isolating a man, and Jake had become accustomed to the solitude that wrapped around him like a well-worn coat. It was a life of routine, waking before dawn, tending to the horses, and mending fences. Friends were few, and letters from the outside world rare. Yet, beneath his hardened exterior, there remained a longing Jake himself had long since tried to bury, a longing for connection, for someone who would see past the scars etched into his soul. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of fire, a soft knock echoed through the cabin door. Jake's hand instinctively went to his revolver. Visitors were rare, and strangers even rarer. "Who's there?" he called, his voice firm but tinged with caution. A gentle voice replied, almost hesitant, "I mean no harm. I need shelter." Jake frowned, his gaze shifting toward the door. He noticed the tall figure standing there, framed against the fading light. Even before she stepped inside, he could sense something extraordinary about her presence. When she finally crossed the threshold, Jake froze, his breath catching in his chest. She was taller than any man he had ever seen, her stature commanding yet graceful. Her long dark hair fell like a river over her shoulders, and her eyes held a depth that seemed to peer directly into the corners of his heart he had long ignored. She wore traditional Apache attire, adorned with intricate beadwork that told stories of heritage, resilience, and pride. For a long moment, the cabin seemed suspended in time. The crackling fire was the only sound, casting dancing shadows across her features. Jake, a man unshaken by storms, gunfire, or even heartbreak, felt an unfamiliar tremor of awe. "Please," she said again, her voice steady now, carrying a quiet strength, "I seek refuge for the night." Jake swallowed hard. There was something in her tone, a blend of dignity and vulnerability, that stirred a protective instinct deep within him. Slowly, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said, his voice softer than before. "You're welcome here." She stepped inside, and the warmth of the cabin enveloped her. She removed her cloak, revealing a frame both tall and strong, yet unmistakably feminine. Jake's eyes, against his will, lingered, not in objectification, but in wonder. She was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Jake extended his hand, a simple gesture of trust. "Jake, you've come a long way. Sit, eat, rest. The night is unforgiving out there." Kaya's lips curved into a faint smile. "Thank you, Jake. Your kindness, it is rare." They shared a simple meal, the kind that came from necessity rather than luxury. Yet, in the silence between them, there was an unspoken connection, a recognition of shared humanity, of lives shaped by both hardship and hope. As the evening deepened, Kaya spoke of her journey. She had been sent by her tribe, a matter of custom and expectation, to seek alliances and understand the world beyond their lands. But more than that, she carried the weight of responsibility, the legacy of her ancestors, and the quiet burden of proving herself in a world not always ready for her. Jake listened, captivated. He shared fragments of his own story, not the full depth, for even in the presence of trust, some wounds are too tender to reveal too soon. He spoke of the land, the long days of labor, and the solitude that had become both a companion and a prison. Hours passed like minutes. The fire dwindled, leaving only embers, and still, they talked. There was an ease between them, a rhythm that transcended words, a recognition that each had faced life with courage, and each had felt the sting of loneliness. The night outside grew colder, and Jake offered Kaya the guest bed, though he knew he himself would likely spend the night by the fire. She declined gently. "I am accustomed to sleeping under the stars," she said, "but tonight, I am grateful for warmth." Jake couldn't help but notice the strength in her posture, the unwavering confidence in her gaze. Yet, beneath it all, there was a vulnerability, a quiet plea for trust. Days passed. Kaya stayed longer than a single night, drawn not by convenience but by a sense of purpose that entwined with Jake's own life in ways neither fully understood. She worked alongside him, helping with the horses, mending fences, and tending to the land. Her presence was transformative, not because it altered the physical landscape, but because it touched the emotional terrain Jake had long considered barren. The local townsfolk whispered about her arrival. Whispers of amazement, of curiosity, and sometimes of fear. But Jake paid little heed. What mattered was the humanity they shared, the laughter over a shared meal, the unspoken support during long, exhausting days, the comfort of knowing someone else understood the weight of life. One afternoon, a crisis struck. A wildfire had broken out across the plains, threatening both Jake's cabin and the surrounding homesteads. Smoke and flames advanced rapidly, consuming everything in their path. Panic spread among the neighbors, but Jake and Kaya didn't hesitate. Together, they rallied the community. Kaya's commanding presence and strategic mind turned chaos into organized action. She directed neighbors to create fire breaks, guided livestock to safety, and worked tirelessly, despite the suffocating heat and choking smoke. Jake, impressed and inspired, followed her lead, his own knowledge of the land complementing her strategies. In those harrowing hours, Jake realized the depth of Kaya's courage, not just physical, but moral. She did not act for glory, recognition, or reward. She acted because it was right. Because someone needed to stand when others faltered. By nightfall, the fire had been contained, thanks in no small part to Kaya's efforts and Jake's unwavering determination. Exhausted, covered in soot and sweat, they watched the remnants of the blaze with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Lives were saved, but the land bore scars that would take time to heal. Jake turned to Kaya, his eyes reflecting both exhaustion and admiration. You're incredible, he said, words inadequate for the gratitude swelling in his chest. Kaya shook her head, a soft smile playing on her lips. We did it together, Jake. You could have done this alone, but you chose not to. That is what matters. In that moment, Jake understood something profound. It was never about strength alone. It was about courage, compassion, and the willingness to act selflessly when it mattered most. Kaya, taller than any man alive, had not intimidated him. She had inspired him. She had awakened a sense of purpose he thought lost forever. The following weeks brought calm, and with calm came reflection. Jake and Kaya spent long evenings on the porch, watching sunsets that set the horizon ablaze, sharing stories, dreams, and fears. Their bond deepened, rooted not in romance alone but in mutual respect, shared trials, and the quiet recognition that they had found something rare, a kindred spirit. One crisp morning, as the first frost kissed the plains, Kaya approached Jake with a determined look. Jake, she began, her voice steady yet gentle, I am to return to my tribe. It is my duty. Jake felt a pang of loss, the thought of her leaving stirring an unfamiliar ache in his chest. I understand, he said quietly. Your people, your responsibilities. I would never ask you to abandon them for me. Kaya reached out, her hand brushing against his. It is not abandonment, Jake. It is a new beginning. For both of us. She spoke of marriage, of uniting not just their lives but their legacies. Her tribe had recognized her courage, integrity, and wisdom, and in doing so, had blessed her union with a partner who had matched her strength and heart. Jake, humbled and overwhelmed, realized that the extraordinary woman who had walked into his cabin was offering not just her hand, but a shared life built on equality, respect, and love. Tears welled in Jake's eyes, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. He had spent years believing that no one could bridge the gap between his solitude and the human connection he craved. Yet here she was, taller than any man alive, showing him that true strength lies not in size, nor in toughness, but in the courage to love, to trust, and to act with unwavering integrity. Their wedding, a modest yet heartfelt ceremony, brought together neighbors, friends, and the Apache community. Kaya's stature, both physical and spiritual, commanded admiration and respect. Jake, beside her, felt not small or overshadowed, but equal and whole. In marrying Kaya, he had not merely gained a bride, he had gained a teacher, a partner, and a living testament to the transformative power of compassion and courage. Years passed, and the plains bore witness to their shared life. Together, they cultivated the land, raised children, and mentored others in the values that had brought them together: kindness, bravery, and the unwavering belief in humanity's potential for good. Travelers passing through often remarked on the unusual sight of the tall Apache woman and her devoted cowboy husband, their harmony a testament to the extraordinary bond forged in a modest cabin during a stormy night. Jake never forgot the moment she first walked in. The fear, the awe, the sudden recognition that life could surprise even the most seasoned heart. And Kaya never forgot the man who, despite his rugged exterior, had offered a stranger shelter, trust, and the beginnings of love. In the quiet of twilight, When the fire in the hearth burned low and the prairie stretched endlessly beyond, Jake and Kaya would sit side by side, hands entwined, hearts aligned. In those moments, they knew the truth of life's greatest lessons. Strength is measured not in height or brawn, but in courage. Love is shown not in grand gestures, but in daily acts of selflessness, and humanity's highest calling is to lift one another, even when the world seems indifferent. And so, the cowboy who had once known only solitude found a partner taller than any man alive, not just in stature, but in spirit. And together, they built a life of compassion, resilience, and hope, a legacy that would echo across the plains long after the winds had carried their names into memory. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary people arrive when you least expect them. And sometimes, they change everything.